So it's been 2.5 years now since Battlefield 2042 released, believe it or not, and as you might remember, it wasn't exactly the smoothest of launches, even for a Battlefield game, which is definitely saying something.
I see.
What is
Robert
that?
Was it spawn? I see a chopper.
What
Oh my god!
is
It's a
that?
hovercraft! It's a hovercraft!
This is open paid beta. Yes, you are correct, bro.
DICE and EA decided to take Battlefield in a new direction with 2042, with the inclusion of the all-new specialists, or the no-pats, these soldiers without flags to fight for. They also upped the player count to 128 players with bigger maps to play on than ever before, and they added in new features like the plus system, which coincidentally may just be one of the cool things that have come out of Battlefield 2042. However, unfortunately, they ultimately failed to deliver on the core Battlefield experience, even after having described the game as a love letter to Battlefield 4 when it was anything but. They said the game was way ahead of schedule when it was clearly a year or so behind, and overall the game released as a completely broken mess and was viewed by the majority of players as a massive regression in the series and a money grab by EA. Now, for those of you who have recently picked up the game in its now much improved state, because DICE have worked on the game a lot and they have improved it a lot, and we'll get into that a little bit later on in the video, you may not fully understand just how broken the game was on launch and the sheer number of features it was lacking. There was a long laundry list of things either removed or missing or downgraded from previous games. There was no scoreboard, no campaign, no server browser, no class system, no in-game stats, emblems, or platoon system. There were way fewer weapons and maps available at launch compared to previous Battlefield games. The few maps that we did have in the game were shipped without environmental art or any cover between objectives. Destruction was at an all-time low, and then of course there were all the game-breaking bugs that people encountered, like hovercrafts being able to fly up buildings. You guys remember that one? Or was that a feature? I'm not sure anymore.
We are flying! We are flying, boys! Helicopter! No! No!
Invincible enemies, invisible enemies, and I could go on and on. And how can we forget those dreadfully tone-deaf, awful end-of-round voice lines that have been now immortalized in the Cringe Hall of Fame?
Oh, you know, I think I pulled something back there.
Well, well, well. That was fun.
That was something, right? Yeah, Angel does it again. Don't be sad. This is just how it works out sometimes.
How those made it into the game, I will never know. It boggles the mind to think that an actual human being listened to those voice lines and they said, yeah, that's what we want to have in our game. And of course, to pour salt into the wound, EA and DICE didn't really man up and face the criticism or apologise to the community for this scam of a Battlefield game as they should have. On the contrary, they tried to fool people with clever marketing tricks to buy their game, knowing full well that it simply wasn't up to par. On the official trailer, they had a quote from PC Games N that read, "One of my favourite games in the series." Now that sounds pretty good, right? But what they actually did is cherry-picked a few words from an article, and if you go and find that article and read it, and I did, this is what they say. "When everything works, Battlefield 2042 is easily one of my favourite games in the series, but it's rare to make it through a match without feeling like something has rattled loose from deep inside the game engine, and no amount of Portal-induced nostalgia can mask the feeling that this game feels rushed out the door." Now that doesn't sound quite as positive in that context, does it? And then there was that famous post from Andy McNamara, the global head of communications for EA. DICE had just taken a couple of weeks off for the Christmas holidays, and after seeing the feedback online, Andy said, "Let us get back from break and get back to work. I love you guys, but these expectations are brutal. The things you want take time to scope, design, and execute." And of course, this brutal expectations line became like the longest running meme amongst the community, but it once again clearly showed how out of touch EA were with their community, because in their eyes, expecting core features to not only Battlefield, but literally any shooter ever made, such as a scoreboard, is something we expect to be in the game at release and not added in 6 months later down the line. Now, I could go on and on here, but you guys get the idea. Battlefield 2042 truly deserved all of the criticism that it received. But I've always felt that most of these in-house decisions were made by management at EA and DICE, and the reviews of DICE on Glassdoor by employees there certainly confirm that. The vast majority of the passionate devs, they just had to bite their lips and sit through it, and my hat really goes off to them. So if you are one of those people who is watching this video and you are one of those people who went to management and you spoke up and you said, we think the game should be changed, it should be different, and you were sort of put in your place, I really feel for you, because not only had you dedicated years of your life to developing this game, but then you also had to face up to a lot of the criticisms and the negative lashback from the community that was none of your fault. So, thank you for actually sticking with the game and making it decent again. However, eventually they did turn over a new leaf, of course. DICE finally started to listen to the community, they got rid of the people responsible for the mess, they installed new leadership with Vince Zampella at the helm, and they put a plan into action to rectify as many areas of the game as they could, and considering what they started out with, they were pretty darn successful. With each new season for the game, they promised to remake the base game maps a few at a time, adding cover, environmental art, and redoing the overall layout. In Season 3, they implemented the class system again, we got VoIP, we got a scoreboard of course, and a bunch of points awarded for various tasks in game like assists that weren't present on release. They also expanded a lot on the UI options, so now most things are more scalable and customizable, and they added additional weapons into the base game by using the portal weapons as a template and then porting them over, calling them vault weapons. Whilst 2042's vehicle mechanics are fundamentally bad in my opinion, and I don't think they'll ever be viewed as some of the best of the franchise, the vehicle team have nonetheless made some great improvements to them wherever possible, increasing their responsiveness, adding new weapons to redefine their roles, and fine-tuning vehicle numbers on a map-per-map basis. So despite the way the game launched, I think DICE deserve a massive amount of credit here, especially those developers who never had any say in the way that the game launched, and perhaps even worse, when they spoke up, they were put in their place by management. Ultimately, they did the right thing, they started to listen to the community, and what we wanted, they carved out a realistic plan of action that they then implemented and stuck to. Now, they did sometimes stumble along the way. There was the really odd decision around squad management where they implemented the system, something which of course was in all of the other Battlefield games but missing from Battlefield 2042 at launch, and this should have been an easy win for DICE. But they decided to leave out the ability for us to remove players from squads. For instance, if you only wanted to play with your friends and a random joined you, you couldn't kick them. Now, they must have known that at the time that this was going to go down badly with the community. It was going to go against our wishes and it would blow up in their face. It did, of course, and ultimately they ended up giving in and adding that feature in later on, which really wasn't a good look because they could have avoided all of that backlash and that negativity altogether by just listening to what the community wanted and adding it in the first place. But yeah, I would say overall, it seems that DICE are now listening to the community and trying to respect their wishes wherever possible. The game is in a pretty good spot. I wouldn't say it'll ever be one of the better Battlefield games. There really is only so much lipstick you can put on a pig, and I know that sounds like a mean thing to say, but that is just the truth. The game was so fundamentally broken at the core engine level that a lot of the problems with it, like bad mouse input, still haven't been solved, and there really is only so much they can do. But nevertheless, new players who are jumping into the game now for the first time are having a pretty positive experience, and I think that's a really good thing. But support for Battlefield 2042 has now come to an end, and outside of the odd balance or bug fix patch here and there, the way the game is right now is most likely the way it will remain until eventually, inevitably, years from now, they take down all of the servers completely and you can no longer play it. And so we start to look to the future. Have DICE and EA learned their lessons with 2042? Are they going to develop the title with the community or against it? Whilst DICE's newfound zest to listen to the community is a very positive sign, they are still far from winning over a lot of the people who left early on, and for those people, the proof will be in the pudding. So what will it take for DICE to pull off a successful Battlefield game in 2025? Well, I can only speak for myself here, but personally, I would like to see DICE actually deliver on what they promised us for Battlefield 2042, which is a grounded, modern FPS in the same style as Battlefield 3 and 4. Go back to the class system of old, embrace that, make a destruction model the likes of which we've never experienced in a Battlefield game before. So don't just go back to the way destruction used to be in like Bad Company 2, like make it even better than that. Everybody's expectations were not met with 2042, so take those expectations and blast them out of the water with the next game. Nail the atmosphere of the game the same way you did with Battlefield 1. Bring back the vehicle play of Battlefield 4. All of the parts of the formula for a successful game are sitting right under your nose, and if history has taught us anything, it's that nobody else has successfully managed to make a Battlefield-like game that has actually stood the test of time. BattleBit saw some brief success, but ultimately it fell off. Even COD tried it with Ground War, which was nothing like Battlefield. Now, another area that they need to improve on is their cadence of content. Battlefield 2042 had 7 maps when it released, and then it got another 8 maps over the 7 seasons, making a total of 15. Now, if you count these 6 portal maps, then you can make it 21, but those 6 maps are not in the base game, and you will only encounter them whilst playing certain select game modes and only with 64 players. And of course, that only goes for the 4 of them: No Shore Canals, Caspian Border, Arica Harbour, and Valparaiso. Battlefield 5 only had 8 maps on release, and ultimately, when that game's support was cut, it ended up with 20, but at least they were all playable in most of the modes, and 7 of them weren't remakes. But these 2 games have something in common. Can anybody guess what it is? They are the only 2 Battlefield games to have had a live service model. In comparison, Battlefield 1, which was the last game to use the premium model, finished up with 29 maps, 10 of them at release. Battlefield 4 got 32 maps, again 10 on release. Battlefield 2042 ended up with 64 weapons in total, whilst Battlefield 4 got 86 weapons. Now, I know that DICE are never going to go back to a premium model and sell us all maps for DLCs like they used to do in the good old days, and we've already heard that the next Battlefield game is going to get a, quote, tremendous live service, which is fine, but they need to make sure that the content release cadence is better. We need to be getting at least 2, preferably 3 maps per season, I would say. 1 map every 4 or 5 months is just not going to cut it. And then I'd say 5 or 6 plus weapons per season as well. Now, maybe if they give us the same amount of content per season as we saw in Battlefield 2042, but those seasons come every 4 to 6 weeks, that would be acceptable as well, but I'm going to assume that that won't be the case. So I'm going to end here in a minute with a fan-made video that I think really sums up all of our feelings on the game at the moment. We've been through the entire lifespan of Battlefield 2042, all the way from when the game was released, all of the trouble, all of the criticisms, through to DICE fixing up the game, and then now where we are looking towards the next Battlefield game. I do want to say, guys, thank you so much for sticking with me here on the channel. I know things haven't always been that positive, and that's just largely due to the fact that a lot of the drama and the situation with the game hasn't been that positive overall. But much like you guys, I'm looking towards the future now and crossing my fingers and hoping that the next Battlefield game is going to be a banger, that it can redeem the community, it can redeem the player base. And if you're somebody out there who has long since stopped playing Battlefield 2042 and you're hoping the next game is going to be good, I'm right there with you. But as the old saying goes, a picture can say 1,000 words, so I'm going to let the video speak for myself here and sort of act as the conclusion for today's video. But thank you guys for sticking with me as always. I'll see you next time.
That's it. Renders it.
What a time to be alive.
Is it too easy? Don't be sad. This is just how it works out sometimes.